Good afternoon, my friends. I have an interesting case for you today, hot off the Law on the Life Newswire. It involves murder, mystery, a 42-year-old cold case, and a serial killer. And I'm going to tell you all about it. I'm your lawyer, Patrick McGeehan, and I am your best friend at your worst time. I'd like to introduce you to Teresa Filling, who was missing since 1980. She was 17 years old and she disappeared from the Tampa area. But I'm going to take you all the way back to 1975, where we're going to meet William Mansfield Jr., Billy as he's known. Billy had a long criminal history. He was 25 years old back then. He was from Michigan. His dad was a convicted child molester in Florida, and Billy, his brother Gary, and his dad lived in Spring Hill, Florida, which is near the Tampa area. Back in 1975, Elaine Ziegler, a white female, 15 years old, was reported missing from a KOA campground in Brooksville, which is also near Spring Hill where Billy lived. She was on vacation with her family from Ohio. They came down, they spent a week in the Brooksville KOA when Elaine went missing without a trace, no clue. They stayed for an extra week looking for her and then went home and never heard from her again or anything about her. Then, skipping forward to 1981, Billy's arrested in Florida for sexual battery and kidnap of a female. Now let's skip forward to 1980. Billy meets a young girl, kidnaps her, and sexually assaults her. The police do an investigation and they tie Billy to the crime and they issue a warrant for his arrest. Well, knowing he was going to be arrested, he flees to California. While in California, he gets stopped by the police and arrested on the sexual battery warrant out of Florida, and they take him to jail. But they mess up on the details of the warrant, and they misconstrue the bond amount on it, and California holds them on a $1,500 bond. So Billy pays the bond and gets out of jail. By the time they figured out they made a mistake, Billy's long gone. Then in December, he meets Renee Saling, a 30-year-old mother of three. He meets her at a bar in California and leaves with her. Witnesses identify Billy as the person she left the bar with. The next day, on December 7th, she turns up in a ditch found by some motorists. And there's discrepancies in the report. One report says that she was shot. The other report cites a medical examiner's report saying that she was strangled and had her pants down and her shirt up. When they identify Billy and connect him with Renee's murder, they put out a bulletin. Billy and his brother Gary are stopped in Nevada. They match the description of the bulletin out of California for the first-degree murder of Renee. But they give fake names and fake identities. But the police didn't believe them because they look so much like the descriptions and the drawings put out in California, so they take them into custody. Well, they're finally identified, and then they're returned to California under a murder one indictment. Billy's returned to California under a murder one indictment for Renee. Then in 1981, going back to Florida to Hernando County to Spring Hill where Billy lived with his brother and his dad, the sheriff's office gets an informant who tells them information about a body buried on the Mansfield property in Spring Hill. Now this property is described as a 6-acre junkyard, and if you take a look at it, it looks like it's still a junkyard. Here it is right here. It's at 3422 Roundup Lane, Spring Hill, Florida. Now you see two paved roads on either side of it. Neither one of those is Roundup. There's a dirt road that runs between them that is Roundup Lane. And this is Roundup Lane from the street view. I mean, if that doesn't look like the road to a serial killer's house, I don't know what does. So in 1981, the police go out to the Mansfield compound or whatever it is, junkyard, whatever, and they do a multi-day excavation. They meet Billy's mom. She claims that she has no idea about anything. But during the excavation, they turn up 4 different sets of human remains. 2 of them are Jane Doe's. The other 2 are identified as Elaine Ziegler. the 15-year-old girl who was missing from the KOA in 1975. The other Jane Doe is identified as Sandra Graham, a white female that Billy met in a bar when she was 21 years old. And then we have the two Jane Does. One is described as a teenage black female, and the other one a white female between 22 and 30. So the sheriff's office in Florida indicts Billy on 4 counts of first-degree murder. Now, Billy's sitting in jail in California with a pending first-degree murder case out there, a pending sexual battery and kidnap case from Florida, which kicked this whole thing off, and then 4 more counts of first-degree murder from Florida. You follow me so far? So in October of that year, before he's scheduled to go to trial, Billy and another inmate hatch an escape plan, and they actually escape from the jail in California. They're gone for 11 hours, and the way they find them is they're outside the gate, run off in the neighborhood somewhere. A woman sees them as she's driving down the road. At first she thought they were joggers, and then she thought to herself, we don't have joggers in this area. She thought it was strange seeing these 2 guys out jogging in orange jumpsuits, so she called the police. Well, it wasn't the orange jumpsuits, it was the corrections jumpsuits, and it turns out that it was Billy and the other inmate. So 11 hours after they left the wire, they were back in police custody. Billy's back in prison. So then finally, the trial comes along. Billy goes through the whole trial, and the jury deadlocks. They can't decide whether to convict him or not. So the judge declares a mistrial. The prosecutor gets a 6-month extension on the retrial. They try him a second time. Now his dad, his child molester dad from Florida, and his brother are testifying against him. And he gets convicted that time. So now he's in jail. He's convicted and gets sentenced in California to 25 years to life. Then he takes a plea offer on the 4 first-degree murder cases from Florida. And his statement on the plea offer was, I'm pleading guilty to this case because I did it, and it's simply that, or something similar to that. So now Billy is sitting out in jail, 25 years to life in California, 4 first-degree murder pleas where he pled life sentences. So if he ever gets out on parole, and we'll go over his parole record in a minute, if he ever gets out on parole, because he's already been in 25 years, he was eligible for parole in 1997. If he ever gets out of California, he'll be sent back to Florida to serve his 4 life sentences. But wait, it doesn't stop there. Then in November of 2020, completely unrelated to all this mess, the Hernando County Sheriff's Office develops information that Billy's brother, Gary, has drugs hidden in the house, the junkyard house, on Roundup Lane. So they go out with another search warrant, or narcotic search warrant, to search for drugs and money. So what did they find? They find plenty of drugs and money, but they also find more human remains because Gary can't keep his mouth shut and starts talking about all the human remains. So they find an additional set of human remains, completely different from the 4 that they recovered back in 1981. They also interviewed Billy Mansfield's son, William Mansfield III, who says, there's bodies everywhere. You haven't found them all. He says there's other bodies on the property, and the property's next door. Doesn't know exactly where, but he tells the police they haven't found them all, that his dad killed more people and buried them out there. So from this new discovery, they send those remains off to be analyzed, and they finally come up with a match through the DNA database, 17-year-old Teresa. And they just now notified Teresa's, well, she has a sister that's surviving and another brother. One sister died and Teresa's mom and dad died. Her other sister and her mom and dad died without knowing what happened to her. They just notified her surviving sister that the remains have been identified. But Billy's still sitting in jail in California, and they haven't as far as I can tell, they haven't indicted him on the Teresa first-degree murder case yet. They may, I don't know. They may, I don't know. But anyway, Billy's sitting in jail in California. He was up for parole in 1997. The first time he was up for parole, he got denied. I'm sorry, in 1996. The first time he was up for parole, he was denied for 5 years. The second time, denied for 5 years. Third time, it was postponed. Fourth time, 5 years. Sixth time, postponed. Seventh time, postponed or denied, 10 years. And then the eighth time, he voluntarily waived his right to a parole hearing for 3 years. So he won't get another parole hearing until sometime after April 21st, 2025. So it doesn't look like Billy's going anywhere in California. And if he does go anywhere, he'll come right back here to Florida to serve at least 4 life sentences, possibly 5 if they indict him on Teresa's murder case. So that's a really interesting case. I always find, being a former homicide detective, I always find serial killer and cold case squads very interesting. The guys that did cold case at our department were amazing guys. They would go back and work cases that were decades and decades old, and they would repeatedly work leads on those cases. And I just find these cases like this just absolutely amazing. Serial killer cases are so rare because most people are murdered by acquaintances and loved ones, people they know. You don't get that many whodunit cases, but serial cases, just the psychology and the mythology behind it, and the way these killers act and the way they act when they're around other people is just fascinating to me. Anyway, if you like this type of content, would like to see more of it, please let me know. Also, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on The Law and Life.